My millionaire son-in-law left me $125 million and his mansion. Nothing for my daughter, his wife who abandoned me. Those were the nights Linda remembered what passion felt like. Before the accident stole him away. Before single motherhood consumed every dream she'd ever dared to whisper in the dark. Have you ever been treated like you don't exist by your own child? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The wealthy widow's hands shook as she read the will, $125 million, all to her. But her own daughter had been completely erased from every page. And now that same daughter was coming home with an army of lawyers to destroy her. Have you ever been given something that felt too good to be true? Have you ever watched family turn against family over money? Do you know someone who's been cut off by their own children? This is the story of a mother who lost her daughter to greed, only to inherit the very fortune that would tear them apart forever. Linda Martinez never expected to become the villain in her own daughter's story. For 64 years, she lived quietly in Houston, working double shifts as a nurse, raising Marissa alone after her husband died in that construction accident. She gave everything to her child. Everything. But when her son-in-law Anthony left her his entire empire instead of his wife, Linda discovered something darker than death, the moment your own flesh and blood decides you're the enemy. Stay with me to discover how one woman fought an entire legal empire and what she found buried in her son-in-law's secret files. If family betrayal has ever left you questioning everything, this story will show you the power of standing your ground. Let me take you back to the day Linda's quiet life exploded. Have you ever been treated like you don't exist by your own child? Linda knew that feeling intimately. Every Sunday for 3 years, she set the dining table for two. Anthony would arrive at exactly noon, carrying flowers from the corner market and stories from his construction projects across Texas. Her son-in-law never missed their weekly dinners, even when Marissa stopped coming home completely. You raised an incredible woman, Anthony would tell her, cutting into the pot roast she'd learned to make just the way he liked it. She just forgot where she came from. Linda would smile and refill his sweet tea, never admitting that Marissa hadn't called in 4 months. Not since she'd moved to Beverly Hills and started posting photos of herself at charity galas with women who wore more diamonds than Linda made in a year. The house felt different without those Sunday conversations. Empty picture frames lined the mantel where Marissa's wedding photos used to sit. She'd asked for them back when she redecorated her Los Angeles mansion. The only photo left showed Linda and her late husband dancing at their anniversary party, his calloused hands gentle on her waist, his eyes full of the kind of love that built families instead of destroying them. Those were the nights Linda remembered what passion felt like. Before the accident stole him away. Before single motherhood consumed every dream she'd ever dared to whisper in the dark. Anthony understood loss. His first wife had died young, leaving him childless until he married Marissa. "You gave me a family," he'd told Linda during his final hospital stay, when Marissa was too busy with her Beverly Hills social calendar to visit. "You were there when it mattered." Linda held his hand through those last weeks, watching him grow weaker while her daughter sent flowers instead of showing up. She never expected gratitude. She certainly never expected revenge. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Linda was watering the small garden Anthony had helped her plant. Her arthritic fingers nearly dropped the phone when she heard the lawyer's voice, formal and careful. "Mrs. Martinez, I need you to come to my office immediately. It concerns Anthony's will." "Is there a problem with Marissa's inheritance?" Linda asked, already reaching for her car keys. The silence on the other end stretched too long. "Mrs. Martinez, your daughter isn't mentioned in the will." "You are." Linda sank onto her porch steps, watching the roses Anthony had planted bloom in defiance of the Texas heat. Her heart pounded against her ribs like it had that night her husband died, sudden and unstoppable. The phone rang again before she could process what she'd heard. It was Anthony's lawyer again, his voice urgent now. "Mrs. Martinez, there's something else. Your daughter is already on her way here from Los Angeles. With attorneys. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Share your story below, because Linda's fight was just beginning. The law office smelled like leather and old money, the kind of place where decisions worth millions happened behind closed doors. Linda sat across from Anthony's attorney, her weathered nurse's hands folded in her lap, trying to make sense of the numbers dancing across the legal documents. $125 million. The River Oaks mansion worth $8 million. Investment accounts she couldn't pronounce the names of. All of it hers. Anthony was very specific, the lawyer explained, sliding another document across the mahogany table. He wanted you to know this wasn't a decision he made lightly. He spent 2 years planning this, Mrs. Martinez. He documented everything. Linda's fingers traced the elegant handwriting in the margin of the will. Anthony's careful script explaining his choice. Linda Martinez showed me what unconditional love looks like. She deserves to be taken care of for once in her life. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Even in death, Anthony saw her value when her own daughter couldn't. What about Marissa? Linda whispered. The lawyer's expression hardened. Your daughter received a trust fund when she married Anthony. She spent it in 18 months on art collections and European vacations. Anthony felt she'd received her inheritance early. Linda remembered those vacations. Marissa's Instagram posts from Paris and Milan, designer dresses that cost more than Linda's car, champagne lunches with people whose names appeared in society magazines. Not once had her daughter invited her along or even sent a postcard. She thought about Anthony's gentle touch on her shoulder during his Sunday visits, the way he'd light up when she shared stories about her nursing shifts or the community garden. He treated her like she mattered, like her opinions and dreams were worth hearing. The respect in his eyes reminded her of how her late husband used to look at her during their quiet moments together, when the world felt small enough to hold in their joined hands. Mrs. Martinez, the lawyer continued, Anthony also left you several personal items. Video messages, letters, and some documents he wanted you to have privately. He handed her a set of keys that felt heavier than they should. Keys to a life she'd never imagined living. That's when the office door burst open. Marissa Martinez Thompson swept in like a hurricane in designer heels, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the Houston humidity. Behind her marched 3 men in identical black suits carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Linda's monthly rent. Mother. Marissa's voice could have frozen fire. What have you done? Linda stood slowly, her back straight despite the arthritis that made every morning a small war against her own body. For 40 years, she'd bent herself around her daughter's needs, apologizing for existing when Marissa needed space to shine. Not today. I loved your husband when you couldn't be bothered to, Linda said quietly. Apparently, he remembered that. Marissa's perfect face twisted with rage. You manipulated a dying man, Mother. I'm going to prove it. The lead attorney stepped forward, his smile sharp enough to cut glass. Mrs. Martinez, we represent your daughter's interests. This contest will be swift and decisive. Linda met her daughter's eyes across the room that suddenly felt too small for all their years of hurt. The woman who'd once curled in her lap during thunderstorms now stared at her like a stranger planning murder. Then we'd better get started, Linda said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. What would you do if your child abandoned you but you suddenly inherited their spouse's fortune? Tell us in the comments, because this war was about to destroy everything Linda thought she knew about family. The parking lot outside the law office felt like a battlefield. Marissa's Beverly Hills attorneys huddled around their black Mercedes, phones pressed to their ears, already building the case that would paint Linda as a manipulative old woman who'd seduced a dying man out of his fortune. This is insane, Marissa hissed, cornering Linda by her 15-year-old Honda Civic. He was on morphine, Mother. Clearly not in his right mind. Linda studied her daughter's face, searching for traces of the little girl who used to beg for bedtime stories about princesses who saved themselves. That child had vanished somewhere between medical school and marrying for money instead of love. Anthony was sharper than you ever gave him credit for, Linda replied. Maybe that's why he saw what you really are. The slap came fast and sharp, Marissa's diamond wedding ring catching Linda's cheek. The pain felt familiar, not physical, but emotional. Another wound from the daughter who'd been hurting her for years in smaller, quieter ways. 40 years I sacrificed for you, Linda said, touching the blood on her face. I worked double shifts to pay for your medical school. I sold my engagement ring to help with your wedding. I gave you everything I had, and you still weren't satisfied. You were supposed to be grateful. Marissa's voice cracked with something that might have been genuine pain. I gave you a purpose, something to live for after Daddy died. Without me, you're nothing. Linda remembered those early years after the accident. 18-hour days at the hospital, coming home to help Marissa with homework while her own exhaustion made the words blur on the page. She'd fallen asleep holding her daughter through nightmares, promising that everything would be okay, that they'd survive together. She'd kept that promise. Marissa hadn't. Anthony saw me differently, Linda said quietly. He saw a woman worth talking to. Worth listening to. Worth caring about. Something dangerous flickered in Marissa's eyes. Anthony was my husband. Mine. Whatever you think happened between you two. Was a son loving his mother-in-law, Linda interrupted. Something you'll never understand because you don't know what love looks like unless it comes with a price tag. The memory hit her suddenly, Anthony's hand covering hers during his final hospital stay, his fevered whisper about how proud he was to be part of her family. Not Marissa's. Hers. The warmth of that recognition had awakened something in Linda she'd thought died with her husband, the knowledge that she deserved to be cherished. You have 72 hours to contest the will, one of Marissa's attorneys announced, approaching with a legal document thick enough to stop bullets. After that, the assets transfer permanently. Marissa slammed her designer purse on the hood of Linda's car, the contents spilling across the hot metal. Credit cards, expensive makeup, and a photo of her posing with people Linda didn't recognize at another charity event Linda hadn't been invited to. You manipulated a dying man, Mother. Marissa's voice dropped to a whisper that promised war. I'm going to prove it. And when I do, you'll lose everything, including what's left of your pathetic reputation. When family members turn against you, do you fight back or walk away? What would you choose? Because Linda was about to discover exactly what she was made of. Linda's hands trembled as she inserted the key into Anthony's study door. The River Oaks mansion felt like a mausoleum, every room holding memories that belonged to someone else's life. But Anthony had wanted her to have this house, these belongings, this chance at a different ending to her story. The study smelled like his cologne and old books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with construction manuals and business journals. His desk sat positioned to catch the afternoon light streaming through windows that overlooked the garden where he'd once told her about his dreams of retiring to build schools in rural Texas. I never had children, he'd said that day, watching her tend to the roses. But if I had a daughter, I'd want her to be like you, strong enough to stand alone, gentle enough to care for others. Linda had laughed, dirt under her fingernails from planting bulbs that wouldn't bloom until spring. Your wife might have something to say about that. My wife, Anthony had replied carefully, forgot a long time ago that strength and kindness can live in the same heart. Now, sitting in his leather chair, Linda understood what he'd meant. The desk drawers revealed a careful record of her daughter's marriage. Credit card statements showing shopping sprees while Anthony worked 18-hour days, travel receipts for trips taken without him, receipts from expensive restaurants where Marissa dined with friends who never included her husband. But it was the letters that broke Linda's heart. Dozens of them, written in Anthony's careful handwriting but never sent. Love letters to a woman who'd stopped reading them years ago. Marissa, I dreamed last night that we talked like we used to, before the money changed everything. I miss the woman I married, the one who laughed at my terrible jokes and fell asleep reading medical journals. Your mother has that same fierce dedication to caring for others. She reminds me why I fell in love with your family in the first place. Linda's fingers traced the words, feeling the ghost of Anthony's loneliness in every line. He'd been writing to a woman who no longer existed, while the woman who did exist spent his money and avoided his company. Another letter, dated just 3 months before his death. I watch your mother struggle to pay her electric bill while you spend thousands on purses you'll use twice. She never asks for anything, never complains, never makes me feel guilty for loving someone who can't love me back anymore. Linda taught you how to care for people, but somehow you forgot to care for the people who care for you. The bottom drawer held something that made Linda's breath catch, a USB drive labeled, "For Linda's Eyes Only," in Anthony's handwriting. Her laptop was older than dirt, but it managed to read the files. Video after video of Anthony documenting his final months, speaking directly to the camera with the careful precision of a man who knew he was running out of time. "Linda," his recorded voice filled the quiet study, "if you're watching this, then Marissa is probably fighting the will. I expected that. I also expected you to doubt yourself, to wonder if you deserve what I've given you." On the screen, Anthony leaned forward, his eyes intense despite the illness that was already stealing his strength. "You saved my life in ways that have nothing to do with medicine. You showed me what it means to be valued for who you are instead of what you can provide. The money isn't a gift, Linda. It's payment for 40 years of loving someone who couldn't return it." The video continued, but Linda had to pause it. Her cheeks were wet with tears. She didn't remember starting to cry. Deep in Anthony's desk drawer, she found another USB drive, this one unlabeled. What secrets had her son-in-law been keeping? Have you ever discovered secrets about someone after they passed? How did it change your perspective? Because what Linda was about to find would change everything she thought she knew about her daughter, and her son-in-law's death. The next morning, I knew I couldn't face this alone. Marissa had money, power, and connections I'd never dreamed of. But I had something she didn't. The truth. I drove to the small law office on Main Street where Marcus Rodriguez practiced. He'd helped me with Anthony's estate planning before, and unlike those fancy Beverly Hills lawyers, he actually listened when regular people talked. "Linda," Marcus said, standing when I walked in. At 58, he was still handsome, with graying temples and kind eyes that reminded me of my late husband. His wife had passed 2 years ago from cancer. "I heard about the will. How are you holding up?" I sat across from his modest desk. "Not well. Marissa's coming after me with everything she's got. She thinks I manipulated Anthony." Marcus leaned forward. "Did you?" "Never. I loved that boy like my own son. When Marissa abandoned him to chase her Hollywood dreams, I was there. When he got sick, I brought him soup and sat with him through chemo treatments she was too busy to attend. Then we'll prove it." Marcus's voice was firm. "What evidence do we have?" I pulled out the USB drive. "Anthony left me this. I'm scared to look at what's on it." Marcus inserted it into his computer. Files appeared, dozens of them. Videos, documents, photos. He clicked on the first video, and Anthony's face filled the screen. "Linda," Anthony's voice came through the speakers, "if you're watching this, I'm gone, and I hope you're fighting for what's rightfully yours." My eyes filled with tears. Even in death, he was protecting me. "She visits maybe twice a year," Anthony continued on the video. "Always asking for money, never asking how I'm feeling. But Linda checks on me every week. She remembers my medications, brings me books, listens to my stories about the business. She's more family to me than my own wife." Marcus paused the video. "Linda, this is powerful testimony. How many more are there?" I counted the files. 23 videos. Plus all these documents. "Your son-in-law wasn't just wealthy, he was smart. He documented everything." Marcus's expression grew serious. "But I have to ask, are you prepared for war? Marissa won't back down easily." I thought of Anthony's gentle smile, how he'd squeeze my hand when the pain got too much during his treatments. "She wrote me off years ago. Now it's my turn to show her what I'm really made of." Marcus smiled. "Then let's begin. Have you ever had to choose between staying quiet and fighting for what's right? Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting." That evening, Marcus and I sat in his office going through Anthony's files. The videos revealed a pattern I'd never noticed. Anthony had been documenting everything for months before he died. Watch this one, Marcus said, clicking on a file dated just 3 weeks before Anthony passed. Anthony appeared on screen, noticeably thinner, his hands shaking slightly. Linda, if something happens to me, I need you to know the truth. Marissa didn't just abandon me emotionally, she's been stealing from the company. My heart stopped. What? Anthony's recorded voice continued. She has access to the business accounts through her position as beneficiary on some of the older trusts. I've been tracking unusual withdrawals. $3 million over the past 2 years, always when I was too sick to notice. Marcus paused the video. Did you know about any of this? Nothing. Anthony never mentioned money problems. I felt sick thinking about it. My own daughter, stealing from the man who loved her. We kept watching. Video after video showed Anthony growing weaker but more determined to document the truth. He talked about my visits, how I'd bring him homemade meals when he couldn't keep anything down. How I'd sit with him during his worst nights, when the fear of dying alone overwhelmed him. Linda sees me as a person, not a bank account, he said in one recording. She held my hand through the chemo. She never once asked me for money, even when I knew she was struggling to pay her own bills. I remembered those nights. The way Anthony would grip my hand so tight it hurt, but I never pulled away. The intimate moments when he'd tell me about his childhood, his dreams, his regrets about not having children of his own. There's more, Marcus said softly, clicking on the final video. This one was different. Anthony was whispering, looking over his shoulder like he was afraid someone might hear. Linda, I'm scared. The symptoms I've been having, they don't match what the doctors said I should expect. The nausea comes in waves, always after Marissa visits. Always after she makes me those special smoothies she insists will help with my appetite. My blood went cold. What is he saying? Anthony's whispered voice continued. I had blood work done privately. The results. Linda, if something happens to me, they didn't just steal my money. I think they're poisoning me. The video ended. Marcus and I sat in stunned silence. We need to call the police, I whispered. Not yet. We need more evidence. These videos are compelling, but we need medical proof. Marcus reached across his desk and touched my hand. Linda, are you prepared for what this might mean? If Anthony was murdered. My daughter killed him. The words came out hollow. My own daughter murdered the man who loved her. We don't know that for certain yet. But Linda. Marcus squeezed my hand gently. If this is true, you're not just fighting for an inheritance. You're fighting to bring a killer to justice. What would you do if you discovered your own child might be capable of murder? Some truths are too terrible to ignore, no matter how much they destroy the family you thought you knew. Word travels fast in a small community. By Sunday morning, everyone at church was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. The whisper started the moment I walked through the doors. There she is, the woman who stole her daughter's inheritance. I heard she manipulated that poor dying man. Shameful, really. A mother should know better. I held my head high and took my usual seat in the third pew, right side. But the Hendersons, who'd sat next to me for 15 years, suddenly found seats on the opposite side of the church. After service, Pastor Williams approached me with that look, the one that said he was about to deliver some uncomfortable truth wrapped in Christian kindness. Linda, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I've been hearing things. Concerns from the congregation. What kind of concerns? People are saying you took advantage of Anthony during his illness. That you influenced him to change his will. Pastor Williams glanced around nervously. Perhaps you should consider returning the inheritance. For the sake of family peace. I stared at him. This man had baptized Marissa, had consoled me when my husband died, had watched me struggle alone for years while my daughter lived her glamorous life in California. Pastor Anthony was like a son to me. I never asked him for anything except to remember to take his medications and eat properly. If he chose to leave me his money, it's because he saw something in me that my own daughter refused to see. But Linda, the appearance of impropriety. The appearance? My voice rose. What about the reality? The reality that Marissa visited her dying husband twice in 6 months? The reality that she called him exactly 4 times during his final weeks, and 3 of those calls were asking about insurance policies? Pastor Williams looked uncomfortable. Family relationships are complicated. Yes, they are. Especially when your family abandons you. I gathered my purse. If the congregation wants to judge me without knowing the facts, that's their choice. But I won't apologize for being there when no one else was. I walked out of that church with my spine straight and my heart breaking. These people had known me for decades. They'd seen me work double shifts to keep food on the table, had watched me care for my dying husband without complaint. But the moment money entered the picture, they assumed the worst. At the grocery store, it was the same thing. Mary Fletcher, who'd been my friend since our daughters played together in elementary school, crossed to another aisle when she saw me coming. Linda's lost her mind with greed, I heard someone whisper in the cereal aisle. Poor Marissa must be devastated. Poor Marissa. The same Marissa who'd sent a postcard for my 60th birthday. The same Marissa who hadn't called on the anniversary of her father's death in 3 years. That evening, I sat alone in Anthony's mansion, my mansion now, feeling the weight of isolation. The house was too big, too quiet, too full of memories that belonged to someone else. But then I remembered Anthony's words from the videos, Linda, you're stronger than you know. Have you ever been judged by people who only knew half the story? Sometimes standing alone is the price of standing for what's right. Living in Anthony's mansion felt like wearing someone else's clothes. Everything was too big, too fancy, too much. But slowly, I began to find my place in his world. I discovered his library, filled with books about business and philosophy. He'd marked passages about integrity, about choosing character over comfort. In the margins, he'd written notes, like Linda says. And, remember Elle's advice about. He'd been listening to me all those years. Really listening. In his bedroom, I found myself standing at the mirror where he'd gotten ready each morning. The woman looking back at me wasn't the invisible mother I'd been for so long. She was someone Anthony had seen as worthy of respect, worthy of love, worthy of everything he had to give. I opened his bedside drawer, looking for something, I wasn't sure what. Maybe just a connection to him, a reminder that I belonged here. What I found was a handwritten letter with my name on it. My dearest Linda, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you're living in this house, surrounded by the comfort you deserve. You probably think I'm crazy for leaving you everything, but let me explain why you're the only choice that makes sense. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Marissa is beautiful, charming, and completely hollow. She inherited her mother's looks but none of her heart. You, Linda, have something rarer than beauty or youth. You have a soul that gives without expecting anything in return. You sat with me through treatments that scared me senseless. You brought me soup when I couldn't keep anything down. You listened to my fears about dying alone, and you made sure I never had to face that fear. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing moments I'd forgotten but he'd treasured. The time I'd driven him to the emergency room at midnight when his fever spiked. The way I'd held his hand during the MRI that diagnosed his cancer. How I'd celebrated with him when the first round of chemo showed progress. You loved me like a son, the letter concluded, so I'm leaving you what a son should inherit. Not because you asked for it, but because you earned it through years of caring when no one else would. At the bottom, he'd added, P.S. Don't let Marissa or anyone else make you feel guilty for accepting this gift. I'm giving it to you because you're the only person I trust to use it wisely and with love. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. Anthony hadn't just left me money, he'd left me proof of my own worth. That night, for the first time since his death, I slept peacefully in the master bedroom. I belonged here. Not because I'd manipulated or schemed, but because someone who mattered had seen the best in me and chosen to honor it. Sometimes we need someone else's eyes to see our own value clearly. Have you ever discovered you were worth more than you knew? The next morning, I called Marcus with new determination. I found something. Anthony left me a letter explaining everything. But I think there's more evidence we haven't discovered yet. What do you mean? He was methodical about everything else. If he suspected Marissa was poisoning him, he would have documented it somehow. Marcus arrived within an hour, bringing coffee and a legal pad. We started in Anthony's home office, searching through files we'd missed the first time. Look at this, I said, pulling out a manila folder labeled Medical, Private. Inside were lab results from a clinic I didn't recognize. These tests aren't from his regular doctor. Marcus studied the papers. These are toxicology screenings. He was testing his blood for foreign substances. His face went pale. Linda, look at the dates. These tests were done weekly for the last 2 months of his life. We spread the results across Anthony's desk. The pattern was clear: elevated levels of arsenic, consistently present and increasing over time. He was being poisoned, I whispered. Slowly, systematically. And look at this. Marcus pointed to handwritten notes in the margins. He documented every time Marissa visited, every time she brought him food or drinks. The arsenic levels spike within 24 hours of each visit. My hands shook as I read Anthony's careful documentation. Marissa would arrive with homemade smoothies, claiming they'd help his appetite. She'd insist on making him special teas to help him sleep. All the while, she was killing him. There's more, Marcus said, finding another folder. This one contained bank statements and financial records. Look at the correlation. Every large withdrawal from the business accounts coincides with Marissa's visits. She wasn't just poisoning him, she was robbing him while she did it. I felt sick. How could she? How could my own daughter? Money changes people, Linda. And from what these records show, Marissa was desperate. Look at her credit card statements, she was drowning in debt. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, she was living way beyond her means. We found more evidence in Anthony's computer files. Email exchanges with a private investigator he'd hired to track Marissa's activities. Photos of her with expensive cars she couldn't afford, vacations to Europe charged to business accounts. But the most damaging evidence was in a hidden folder labeled Insurance. Anthony had quietly increased his life insurance and changed the beneficiary from Marissa to me just 3 months before his death. But he'd kept copies of all the original paperwork that showed Marissa had been pushing him to increase the policy amount for over a year. She was planning this, I said, the full scope of her betrayal hitting me. She was planning to kill him from the beginning. Marcus's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then hung up with a grim expression. That was my investigator friend. Marissa just filed for an emergency restraining order against you. She's claiming you're threatening her and trying to frame her for crimes she didn't commit. She's scared, I realized. She knows we're getting close to the truth. There's something else. Marcus hesitated. She's not working alone. The lawyer she hired, James Peterson, he's more than just her attorney. My friend found hotel records. They've been having an affair for over 2 years. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. While Anthony was dying, while he was trusting his wife to care for him, she was sleeping with another man and planning his murder. They were in this together, I said. All of it. What would you do if you discovered the depth of your child's betrayal went beyond anything you could imagine? Sometimes the people we love most are capable of unthinkable evil. David Chen, Anthony's business partner, called me the next day. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Linda, we need to meet. There are things about the business you need to know, things that will help your case against Marissa. We met at his downtown office, 40 floors above Houston's business district. David had built the real estate empire alongside Anthony, and losing his partner had aged him visibly. I should have come forward sooner, David said, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. But I was trying to protect Anthony's memory. Now I realize protecting you is more important. The folder contained financial records that made my stomach drop. Marissa hadn't just stolen $3 million, she'd embezzled over $5 million across 3 years, using her access to various business accounts. She was clever about it, David explained. Small amounts from different accounts, always when Anthony was too sick to review the books carefully. She'd forge his signature on transfer authorizations, claiming they were for medical expenses. Why didn't you stop her? I tried. But Anthony refused to believe his wife was stealing from him. He made excuses, said she was just bad with money, that she deserved security while he was ill. David's voice cracked. He loved her blindly, right up until the end. I studied the evidence: bank transfers, forged signatures, fake invoices for medical equipment that was never purchased. This proves she was stealing, but not that she killed him. Actually, it does. David opened his laptop. We had security cameras in the office. I kept the footage from Anthony's final weeks, thinking someday it might be important. The video showed Marissa in Anthony's office, going through files in his desk. But what shocked me was the timestamp, 2 a.m., 3 days before Anthony died. She broke into the office at night, I breathed. Watch what she takes. David fast-forwarded the video. On screen, Marissa removed files from Anthony's locked cabinet, the same files that contained his private medical records and toxicology results. She knew he was on to her, David said. She was destroying evidence. But David saved the most shocking revelation for last. He pulled up phone records showing calls between Marissa and her Beverly Hills lawyer, James Peterson, dating back 18 months. They weren't just having an affair, Linda. They were planning this from the beginning. Look at the call frequency. It increases every time Anthony's condition worsened. The calls painted a clear picture. Long conversations late at night, multiple calls on the days Anthony had business meetings, suspicious communication patterns that suggested coordination. Peterson was advising her on how to steal the money without getting caught, David concluded. And when Anthony got suspicious, they decided to accelerate their timeline. I felt a strange mix of vindication and horror. You'll testify to all this? I'll do more than that. David's expression hardened. Anthony was my best friend for 20 years. If his wife killed him, I want to see her pay for it. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Have you ever found allies in people you barely knew? David's courage gave me the strength to keep fighting. Marcus called me at dawn, his voice urgent. Linda, you need to get down to my office immediately. My investigator found something that changes everything. I threw on clothes and drove through the empty morning streets. Marcus met me at the door with coffee and a grim expression. Remember how we suspected Peterson was more than just Marissa's lawyer? Well, we were right, but it goes deeper than we thought. The investigator, a weathered man named Frank Rodriguez, Marcus's cousin, had spread photos across the conference table. They showed Marissa and Peterson in hotel rooms, restaurants, and luxury resorts. This affair has been going on for over 2 years, Frank explained. But look at these dates carefully. Their first documented meeting was exactly 2 weeks after Anthony's cancer diagnosis. The timeline was damning. Peterson hadn't been hired to handle legitimate legal work. He'd been brought in specifically to help plan Anthony's death and steal his fortune. And there's more, Frank continued, pulling out financial records. Peterson has gambling debts, serious ones. He owes over $2 million to some very dangerous people. This wasn't just about Marissa's greed, Peterson was desperate. Marcus showed me phone records from Peterson's law firm. Look at these calls to life insurance companies. Peterson was researching Anthony's policies, checking on payout procedures, asking about investigation protocols for suspicious deaths. They were planning the perfect murder, I realized. Exactly. Slow poisoning would look like cancer progression. The life insurance would pay out quickly. And with Peterson handling all the legal aspects, they could frame you as the manipulative mother-in-law who somehow tricked a dying man. But Frank had found the smoking gun in hotel security footage from Peterson's favorite resort in Cabo. The video showed Marissa and Peterson celebrating with champagne and cocaine, and the timestamp was from the night of Anthony's funeral. They were partying while we buried him, I said, feeling sick. It gets worse, Marcus said quietly. Frank found their travel records. They'd been to Mexico together 6 times in the past year, always paying cash, always using fake names. They were setting up offshore accounts to hide the money. The evidence painted a picture of calculated evil that was hard to comprehend. While I was holding Anthony's hand through chemo treatments, while I was bringing him soup and reading to him during his worst days, his own wife was systematically poisoning him and planning to blame me for his death. There's one more thing, Frank said, hesitating. Peterson's secretary came forward. She's willing to testify that she typed up fake wills, multiple versions, testing different scenarios for framing you. What do you mean? They had backup plans. If the murder didn't work, they were going to claim you forged Anthony's signature. If the forgery angle failed, they were going to say you threatened him. Peterson had documents prepared for every possible defense you might use. Marcus leaned forward. Linda, this means they've been planning to destroy you from the beginning. The inheritance was never supposed to go to you, you were supposed to be their scapegoat. The full scope of their conspiracy was breathtaking. They hadn't just planned to kill Anthony, they'd planned to destroy my life in the process, leaving me disgraced and potentially imprisoned while they lived luxuriously on blood money. Have you ever realized that people you trusted were planning your destruction? Sometimes the cruelest betrayals are the ones that are planned in advance. I walked into Marcus's office the next morning carrying Anthony's letter and wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to his funeral. But today, I wasn't mourning. Today, I was fighting back. I want to file charges, I announced. Murder, embezzlement, conspiracy, everything we can prove. Marcus looked up from his paperwork. Linda, are you certain? Once we take this step, there's no going back. Marissa will be arrested. This will be front-page news. Your life will never be private again. I thought about Anthony's gentle hands holding mine during those final weeks. About the trust in his eyes when he told me his fears. About the systematic way they'd poisoned him while stealing his life's work. She killed the kindest man I've ever known, I said firmly. If I don't fight for him, who will? We spent the morning preparing documents. Marcus had arranged for the district attorney to review our evidence immediately, the medical records, the financial crimes, the hotel footage showing Marissa and Peterson celebrating Anthony's death. The DA is very interested, Marcus told me after making the call. Especially in Peterson's involvement. They've been investigating his law firm for other irregularities. By afternoon, we were walking up the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters who'd gotten wind of the story. Mrs. Williams, is it true you're accusing your own daughter of murder? They shouted. I stopped on the steps and looked directly into the cameras. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm presenting evidence and letting the justice system decide what really happened to Anthony Chin. Inside the courthouse, District Attorney Rebecca Martinez reviewed our evidence with the intensity of a surgeon. She was younger than I'd expected, but her reputation was formidable. This is one of the most comprehensive evidence packages I've seen, she said after 2 hours of review. The medical records alone are enough for a murder charge, but the financial evidence shows clear premeditation and conspiracy. What happens now? I asked. We issue arrest warrants for both Marissa Williams-Chin and James Peterson. Given the flight risk and the offshore accounts your investigator discovered, we'll request they be held without bail. Marcus squeezed my hand. Linda, are you ready for what comes next? This will be a media circus. They'll dig into every aspect of your life, looking for ways to discredit you. I thought about all the years I'd stayed quiet, accepted being invisible, allowed others to define my worth. Those days were over. Let them dig, I said. I've got nothing to hide. I worked double shifts to support my family. I cared for a dying man when his own wife wouldn't. I've earned every dollar Anthony left me through years of love and loyalty. The DA smiled. Mrs. Williams, I believe you're going to make an excellent witness. Have you ever reached the moment where staying quiet becomes more dangerous than speaking up? Sometimes claiming your power means accepting the spotlight, even when it's uncomfortable. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of the packed courtroom as the prosecutor played Anthony's videos for the jury. His voice filled the room, telling the truth about our relationship, about Marissa's neglect, about his growing suspicions that someone was poisoning him. "Linda," Anthony's recorded voice said, "you're the strongest woman I know. If something happens to me, don't let them make you feel small. You deserve everything I'm giving you." Across the aisle, Marissa sat between her lawyers, dressed in conservative black, playing the grieving widow. But I could see the fear in her eyes every time Anthony's voice spoke about her theft and abandonment. Peterson sat separately, his gambling debts and affair with Marissa having destroyed any pretense of professional relationship. His own lawyer looked miserable. Defending a man caught on camera celebrating his client's husband's death was a losing battle. When they called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my head high. The prosecutor, D.A. Martinez, smiled encouragingly. "Mrs. Williams, can you tell the jury about your relationship with Anthony Chen?" I looked directly at the jury, 12 people who would decide whether justice would be served. Anthony was the son I never had. When my daughter moved away and rarely visited, Anthony filled that empty space in my heart. He'd come to dinner every Sunday, help me with household repairs, listen to my worries about getting older alone. Did you ever ask him for money or gifts? Never. When I lost my job at the hospital due to budget cuts, he offered to help with my mortgage. I refused. When my car broke down, he wanted to buy me a new one. I refused that too. Anthony's friendship was worth more than any money he could have given me. But you accepted his inheritance. I accepted it because his letter explained that he wasn't just giving me money, he was giving me proof that I mattered. That the years I spent caring about him, checking on him, being there when he was afraid, those years had value. The defense lawyer, a sharp-faced woman from Beverly Hills, approached for cross-examination. "Mrs. Williams, isn't it true that you were struggling financially when Mr. Chen became ill?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that a wealthy, sick man would be an attractive target for someone in your position?" I looked at her steadily. "If I wanted to target wealthy men, counselor, would have started decades ago. I've been a nurse for 40 years. I've cared for hundreds of wealthy patients. Not one of them ever accused me of manipulation or theft. But this was different. This was family. Yes, it was different. Anthony was family by choice, not by blood. He chose to love me, and I chose to love him back. That's something Marissa never understood. Love isn't something you inherit or deserve by accident. It's something you earn through your actions." The prosecutor showed the jury the hotel footage of Marissa and Peterson celebrating on the night of Anthony's funeral. The gasps from the gallery were audible. "The evidence shows," D.A. Martinez said in her closing argument, "that while Linda Williams was sitting beside Anthony's deathbed, holding his hand and reading to him, his wife was in a hotel room planning how to spend his money with her lover." When the jury returned after 3 hours of deliberation, my heart was pounding. The foreman stood. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Marissa Williams-Chen, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, James Peterson, guilty." I closed my eyes and felt Anthony's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. Justice had been served. Have you ever watched truth triumph over deception? Sometimes the courtroom is the only place where the whole story finally gets told. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. I sat in the same front row seat, but this time I wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside me, his hand warm in mine. David Chen was there, along with several of Anthony's friends from the business community. Even my old nursing colleagues had come to support me. Marissa looked different now. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by orange jail coveralls. Her perfectly styled hair was pulled back severely, and the makeup that had always hidden her true nature was gone. For the first time, I could see the hollow person Anthony had described in his videos. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the sentencing guidelines with the gravity the case deserved. This court has rarely seen such calculated evil, she began. The defendants didn't just commit murder, they tortured their victims slowly over months while stealing his life's work. They planned to frame an innocent woman for their crimes, showing a level of cruelty that defies understanding. Peterson was sentenced first, life in prison without parole. His gambling debts had led him to orchestrate the death of a man he'd never even met. The judge's words were harsh but fair. Then it was Marissa's turn. She stood shaking as the judge read her fate. Marissa Williamson, you have been convicted of murdering your husband through systematic poisoning while embezzling over $5 million from his business. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the pain you caused. You planned to destroy your own mother to cover your crimes. I found myself holding my breath. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marissa crumpled. As the bailiffs approached to take her away, she turned toward me with tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I saw the little girl she'd once been, the daughter who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd brought me dandelions and called them flowers. Mom, she whispered as they put the handcuffs on. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But some apologies come too late. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal with words. I watched them lead my daughter away and felt mostly emptiness where anger used to be. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, but Marcus guided me past them to his car. We drove in silence to the cemetery where Anthony was buried. I knelt beside his headstone and placed fresh flowers, real ones, not dandelions. It's over, I told him. Justice is served. You can rest now. Marcus knelt beside me. Over the months of working together, fighting together, our friendship had deepened into something more. We'd found love in an unexpected place, built on mutual respect and shared loss. What now? He asked quietly. I touched Anthony's headstone one last time. Now I live. I use his gift to help people, the way he would have wanted. And maybe I let myself be happy again. With me? I looked at this good man who'd stood by me through the worst fight of my life. If you'll have a woman who comes with this much baggage. He smiled. Linda, you're not baggage. You're a survivor. Sometimes the end of one nightmare is the beginning of something beautiful. Have you ever found that your greatest trials led to unexpected blessings? 1 year later, I stood in the ballroom of Houston's finest hotel, surrounded by young nurses receiving scholarships from the Anthony Chin Memorial Foundation. The money he'd left me was being used exactly as he would have wanted, to help people build better lives through education and compassion. Mr. Chin believed that caring for others was the highest calling, I told the scholarship recipients. You've chosen a profession that requires not just skill, but heart. These scholarships represent his faith in your ability to make the world better. Marcus stood at the back of the room, proud and handsome in his best suit. We'd been married 6 months ago in a small ceremony at the same church where I'd once been whispered about and shunned. Funny how money changes people's memories. Suddenly, everyone remembered how kind and generous I'd always been. After the ceremony, Marcus and I walked through the hotel's garden. The evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine. Any regrets? He asked, the question we'd both been avoiding. I thought about Marissa, serving her life sentence in a federal prison 3 states away. She'd written me letters, dozens of them, but I'd stopped reading after the first few. They were full of excuses, justifications, and requests for money for her prison commissary account. She still didn't understand that love can't be bought or manipulated. About the trial? About the marriage? About using Anthony's money this way? I shook my head. No regrets. For the first time in my life, I'm living without apology. Even about Marissa? That was harder to answer. I grieve for the daughter I thought I had. But I can't mourn someone who never really existed. The real Marissa was capable of murder, theft, and framing her own mother. I have to accept that I raised someone I didn't really know. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face me. You didn't fail as a mother, Linda. Some people choose darkness no matter how much light they're given. He was right. I'd raised Marissa with love, taught her right from wrong, showed her the value of hard work and compassion. But somewhere along the way, she'd chosen greed over goodness, murder over mercy. That was her choice, not my failure. Do you think Anthony would be proud? I asked, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I think he's watching you use his gift to change lives, married to a man who adores you, standing tall after the greatest betrayal imaginable. Yes, Linda. I think he's very proud. We walked back toward the hotel where the scholarship recipients were still celebrating with their families. Young people full of hope and determination, planning to spend their lives caring for others. This was Anthony's real legacy, not the money or the mansion, but the lives that would be touched by his generosity through my hands. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I worried it might be another letter from Marissa's prison, but it was from David Chen, Anthony's business partner. Linda, saw the scholarship ceremony on the news. Anthony would be so happy. You're honoring his memory in the most beautiful way. I showed the message to Marcus, who smiled. You've built something good from something terrible. That takes incredible strength. As we reached the hotel entrance, I paused to look back at the garden where we'd walked. 6 months ago, I'd been a lonely widow living on a tight budget, dismissed by my own daughter, invisible to most of the world. Tonight, I was a philanthropist, a wife, a woman who'd fought the legal system and won. But more than that, I was finally living as the person Anthony had always seen in me, someone worthy of respect, worthy of love, worthy of using great resources to create positive change. Ready to go home? Marcus asked, offering me his arm. Home. Not the small house where I'd lived alone for so many years, but the mansion Anthony had left me, our mansion now, filled with Marcus's books alongside Anthony's, our photos replacing the formal portraits, the sound of laughter replacing the hollow silence of grief. Ready, I said, taking his arm. As we drove through Houston's glittering skyline, I thought about the girl I'd once been, working double shifts and dreaming of a daughter who would love me unconditionally. That dream had died, but it had been replaced by something better. A reality where love was earned through actions, where respect was given to those who deserved it, where an invisible woman could become someone who mattered. Anthony's greatest gift wasn't the money. It was showing me that I was worthy of being seen, worthy of being loved, worthy of standing up and fighting when the world tried to make me small again. The scholarship recipients would go on to heal people, comfort families, and make differences in ways I could only imagine. Marissa would spend her life in a cage of her own making. Peterson would never again manipulate vulnerable people. And I would continue living fully, loving deeply, and using every day to prove that quiet strength can triumph over loud cruelty. Have you ever realized that your greatest tragedy was actually the doorway to your greatest triumph? Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we actually needed. If this story of standing up for yourself when the world turned against you inspired you, share it with someone who needs to remember their own worth. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your family betrayed you for money? Remember, your value isn't determined by who stays in your life or who leaves. It's determined by how you stand when you're standing alone, and how you use your strength to lift others once you found your footing again. Thank you for being part of this family. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.